What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are checking out a video from CNBC International called "Why Are People Not Getting Married Anymore?" Let's check it out.
No one knows exactly when the first marriage took place. People have been getting married for thousands of years. It's an ancient institution, but for some people, it's perhaps a bit too ancient. 89% of the world's population now live in countries with falling marriage rates. This is especially pronounced in the richest countries. Among the 38 OECD nations, most recorded between 7 and 10 marriages per 1,000 people.
89% of the countries in the world are now in a marriage decline, is what they're saying. So it's not just a problem that's going on in the West. So this is a global phenomenon. My initial thoughts on this would probably be there's a lot of financial factors. They don't feel secure enough to start a family.
In 1970. By 1995, this fell to around 5 to 7 marriages, and it continues to plummet today. So why is this happening, and will it spell the end of marriage as we know it? A stable marriage has often been associated with financial stability. Married households in the US hold significantly higher wealth than cohabiting.
Median net worth in households married, this is in the US, this is back in 2019, $68,210 is not a lot of money in California at least. That's like a one-person income if you were to work full-time. Yeah, that's about the average person.
In couples or singles. But despite this, the marriage rate in the US has dropped by nearly 60% since the 1970s. And the median age for first-time marriages has increased for both women and men.
For a variety of reasons, I think upper middle-class Americans are just much more likely to be kind of intentional about sequencing their lives in terms of education first, work second, marriage third, and the baby carriage after all of that. And so they're just in a...
There's also the changing social norms. Attitudes towards marriage nowadays are totally different from what they were 20 years, 30 years ago comparison. And more people, I believe, are pursuing personal goals and fulfillment.
A much better spot, both financially and relationship-wise, when they go ahead and have kids.
The cost of marriage usually starts with a wedding. This is a tiny wedding cake I bought in London for $50, thankfully just within our production budget. But if you wanted the same cake, but big enough to serve 100 people, then you would have to pay at least $250.
$1 million.
Add in the price of a venue, a tuxedo,
$250 for a
dress,
cake, wedding
music,
cake, that's cheap.
And suddenly, you're looking at a very large bill. Getting married is just the tip of the iceberg. Starting a family adds all sorts of economic commitments. It typically starts with a house, followed by a car, maybe kids, which means more expenses like books, toys, and family vacations. In a nutshell, you become a fully engaged consumer in the economy. Some people choose not to go down this road, while others simply can't afford to.
Yeah, a lot of people can't afford to even provide for their own, even working full-time jobs. It's difficult for average American to pay their bills, get ahead in life, save for retirement, even save for a down payment for a house. You have to be going 100 miles an hour, working 60 hours a week just to get by and save, have a little bit of breathing room financially. So it's very difficult to add on another expense, right?
From about 1980 to the present, there's been no greater increase in family instability than there has been among this working class demographic in the US, sort of in basically the second quintile of the family income distribution. I think there are a couple of big factors here in play. So one major factor, of course, is sort of the changing economy and the way in which working class men are less likely to be stably employed.
American adults from high-income groups have maintained a stable marriage rate since the 1970s. But among the middle and especially lower-income groups, marriages declined to 66 and 38% respectively by 2018. Since the 1970s, there has been a decline in the number of American men without college degrees in the US labor force.
A lot of men have given up on trying to form families because it feels hopeless to put in all that effort. What's that term? The juice is not worth the squeeze. And I haven't mentioned this, but the divorce rate, at least here in America, is so bad that a lot of men have opted out on even doing that. So what most people, or most guys do, is they'll work enough to provide for their own, day-to-day needs, pay the bills, save up a little money, go on a vacation, and live a comfortable life. It's a simple life and drama-free, but there's just not enough left in the tank to start a family and even raise a kid. And also, if you were to get divorced here in the U.S., most of the time the guy gets, the short end of the bargain. Financially, it's financial suicide, basically.
The last 50 years also saw their earnings stagnate and decrease.
By contrast, we're seeing women having a more secure footing in today's sort of more service post-industrial economy. And so we know that marriage is many things, but it's also in part a financial undertaking. And so when you have men who are losing ground financially in this working class demographic and women who are gaining ground, I think they both kind of see that the guy is less marriageable. And so they're less likely to kind of get married in the first place and more likely to get divorced in the second place.
On the female perspective, a lot of women now focus on their career and education. So right out of high school, they go to college. They want to, earn as much money as they can. A lot of women will also opt to have kids later on in their lives, like in their 30s. And women have gone away from the nurturing and the homemaker type of role. So both sides, both genders and both sexes are both confused on what the hell their role is in a relationship.
Another phenomenon that affects marriage is the rise of secularism in modern societies. Here in the UK, for example, 1 in 3 people say they have no religion, up 25% since 2011. And this is a key reason why marriage is no longer the only basis for family formation. In 2021, 51% of births in the UK took place outside of a marriage. 42% of children in the European Union and 40% of children in the US are also born to unmarried parents. For countries where this is acceptable socially, the decline in marriage does not necessarily spell trouble for the country's demographics. But in other parts of the world, most notably in East and South Asia, marriage and birth rates are highly correlated. Only 2.3% of babies are born outside of marriage in Japan, which means if people don't get married, they're also very unlikely to have children.
So Japan, obviously a lot of people know about this. They're having a demographic collapse. There are way too many Japanese people that are in their later years already, right? They're senior citizens, and not enough younger people to support the base of the economy and the population. Probably one of the first countries to have this issue, and this was going on for a couple decades now. And the West and the US, they're right behind them at this point.
This is a problem for Japan, the world's third largest economy and home to the world's oldest population.
The fall in birth rate is something that happens in many countries. Governments all over the world are worried because of economic implications.
From state-funded matchmaking apps to marriage support concierges, the Japanese government has introduced several incentives to promote marriage. But so far, nothing has worked.
There is this, financial constraint that people feel that they may not be able to support a family and raise children.
I went to Japan a couple of years ago, and if I remember correctly, the average Japanese salary, and this is in Tokyo, I believe, was around 40 to 45,000 in US dollars, which is not a lot compared to the cost of living over there. To me, relatively, the cost was relatively cheap because I'm from California and the cost of living here is the highest anywhere really in the world. That's a prime example right there where people just can't form families and decide not to form families because they just can't afford to raise a kid and buy a house and all the traditional things that go with it. And it makes it really difficult for them to do that.
Similar problem is troubling authorities in neighboring China, which registered the fewest marriages in 2022 since public records began. The country also saw its birth rate fall to a record low the same year.
By 2050, China's working population will reduce by 10%, and not enough, babies born to fill that gap. And the, dependent population, those who reach retirement age, will double.
In a sharp reversal from its former one-child policy, the Chinese government encourages marriage and childbirth since 2016.
Yeah, they really messed up on the one-child policy there. They did not have the forethought of looking into the future and how that'll affect their economy and society as a whole. Now they're trying to catch up and try to produce more babies to replace their aging population, but it's only going to be a matter of time in a few decades where they're going to be in a status similar to Japan. There's just not enough young people to support the older population.
But this time, it's Chinese women who have reservations about married life.
And the women tend to spend significantly much more time than their husband in childcare and other related care. And also the Chinese workplace is not very women-friendly. And why women don't want to get married, why women don't want to have children is because this society is not women-friendly, the society is not child-friendly.
Men talk about the personal freedom that they get for not getting married, but at the same time, they are really worried that if they were to set up a family, they will not be able to sustain a family with the income.
That's true. I probably feel a similar sentiment. If I were to be making, for example, $100,000 here in California, that might be enough to start a family if my partner, my girlfriend, or rather my wife, is also working. So ideally, you would need to have like maybe 200 to 250,000 to minimum a year to start a family, to feel secure enough to support 2 people and then 1 child here in California. Okay, so there's a big asterisk there, here in California.
The Western heart is closing in an important extent to marriage and family life. And that's going to have a huge impact, not just economically, but also obviously socially and emotionally on young adults today.
There are some pros, though, with getting married, like tax benefits, health insurance, you have inheritance rights. Obviously, you have a family, a social support around you with a family that you're building. There's also a social aspect to it where if you're a family man or woman and you have a family that you're raising and building, there's something about that also that is, I'm trying to find the word for it. I want to say honorable, not the exact word for it. I guess it would be honorable to raise a family. But there's also a lot of cons also for people who try to start a family and getting married. Like the obviously financial burden, you're losing your independence both for both the man and the woman, right? You're not gonna go on vacations every couple of months. You're not having you're not having girls or guys' nights out anymore. And obviously you're giving up your freedom to do whatever you want because you are tied to your family at that point. So it's a huge sacrifice, right? And millennials, we can be a little selfish with our endeavors. What do you guys think? Share, comment, like, dislike, and I'll see you guys next time.